So we're back here in the terminal because, well, it's where Claude Code sort of lives. And we're going to say, what am I not typing? Okay, Claude, can you use the MCP server in Saiku to show me which cubes are available? So whilst that's working, he's going to have a think about that, and as ever, the Anthropic web service is throwing up a little bit. We're going to sort of try and do two things at once here, and so we're also going to open up another one, and we're going to go to here. There we go. So I'm going to make create a demo project, and so what I'm going to do, and this, I haven't put any thought into this, so this is going to be an interesting couple of minutes whilst we try this, but can you bootstrap a Flutter project for interacting with data in this system? So Flutter is a cross-platform framework that allows you to build out a number of different applications using the same code base. Again, I believe in the same ilk as GWT, it's a Google framework that allows you to build basically like an iOS native app, a web app, an Android app, all in the same code base, allowing you to like interact with it. So because he's not stupid, somehow he also knows that there's well, we've been talking about Saiku, Mondrian, and OLAP stuff, and so he says, how do you want to access the sales data? We're going to access this data using Saiku, or attempt to. So we're going to use that to then build that out. The reason we do this, like, yes, you could obviously build a database straight into the back end, but in doing this, it gives us still that same row level security of you using it. It gives us the caching out of the box, so that when someone goes and uses the app twice and sees the same data twice, it's not hitting the database. There's a range of different reasons why you might do this. Equally, it's not wrong to just connect this thing directly to Postgres and get it to write a query. So depending on what makes the most sense at the time of you doing it, you know, there's a bunch of different ways that you would architect this, you know, to allow for the interaction that you need. And we might try this and find it doesn't work, and then we'll go and use Postgres anyway. But yeah, anyway, so where's the state? What's the state of the Saiku server that the app will talk to? It is running because we were just looking at it. And so here we go. So he's then going to ask a few more questions, and we'll see what happens. So running server is the cleanest path. Here's some points. What should the bootstrap Flutter app actually do in V1? And so we're going to keep it, we're going to keep it really simple. I hope we're going to keep it really simple. We're going to ask him for a fixed dashboard. I have no idea what Claude will do at this point, but we're going to go through this and ask him to create a Flutter app that will allow us to be able to see this. I want to be able to build it for iOS and Android, which might make me sad in a minute. And I definitely want to build the web one because that's really what I can show you on the screen without running Xcode and a whole bunch of emulation stuff, which might work. I don't know. Submit the answers, and off he goes. We will come back to that shortly. So down here, we have asked Claude to use the MCP service to connect to the local MCP server. Inside of here, we've got then a number of different cubes that he has returned, you know, that are useful to us. So he says that FarmerRx is alive and up and running. And so from that, we should then be able to say, okay, can you tell me something about the geographic distribution of patients against the drug sales in pharma RX. And he's going to go off and then use the MCP connector, or hopefully use the MCP connector to go and find that out. Whilst that's running, I'm going to swiftly come back over here. And so he says that I have what I need in scope. I'm still waiting on the connection details. Please drop them in when you can. All the other stuff. So connection details are HTTP localhost 8080. Because it's a demo, user pass is admin. And then he says, in the meantime, here's the approaches and the design. Proposed approaches, direct DO and session cookie off, Flutter talk straight to Saiku, DO with a cookie jar. He's talking about authentication. And this is still why you can't just go and vibe code your way through this. I said this at the start. I'm going to say this again. I'll probably say it at the end. But like, there's a bunch of stuff in here that's using your data in a sensitive way. And so if you were going to do this in real life, you need to make sure that the authentication layer and the authentication handling is tip top, especially if you're going to expose that data to people who aren't in your core circle, maybe external users, but also just internal users. The majority of data leaks around the globe come from internal sources deciding to take that data out with them. And so making sure that your vibe coded application is secure, it should be top of the list, because over the next couple of years, I expect a whole bunch of lawsuits and what have you as top secret sensitive data accidentally gets vibe coded its way out onto the web. So this stuff does mean, you know, quite a lot. We're going to skim through it, but it is important to bear in mind when you're building these apps out. You know, and so he says, do you want to use session off raw MDX, Riverpod and FL chart? He then says, or fewer dependencies if you use HTTP package, but you hand roll your cookie session handling, or a proxy that sits in front of Saiku. So he recommends I reckon he's probably off to a decent start. So let's go with, you know, can't spell, doesn't really matter, but like proposed approach A for the initial build out. And we'll see what happens. So he's off doing some stuff. Approach here is, before I lock in the design, let me quickly probe the running server and confirm the REST contract. I can also say because Saiku is open source, so if you want to be able to run this locally, you can do. If you want to inspect the source code, sure you look at projects, Saiku. So just sort of give him a point to the source code if he wants to go and have a look, which will generally, you know, probably make his life a bit easier. There is, of course, an awful lot of extensive information about Saiku on the web, which they will have trained on, because Saiku has been around for a fairly long time by now. He's then sucked up my point about the Saiku stuff. This is basically his plan. So, like, you know, I could sit at this point and say, you know, go and figure out some more plans, do things before I write the doc. I should say, discover the data catalog once auth is done. And no, those tiles look fine. So, you know, he's then going to have a look at the source code a bit. He's realized that it's basic auth, because out the box, that's all we really have. So he can also make adjustments to his plan at this point. And so, you know, he can make changes to Saiku because this is local. Like, clearly you wouldn't do this if this was remote and this was an already running service, but like I have the ability to be able to do that. And now he's going to have a look at like some of the URLs and make sure that's right. And then he's going to have a look at the data source. We will go back to here. Here we go. So you can see here we've asked Claude some stuff, and here's what the Pharma RX cube says about geographic distribution. Now, of course, we're using Claude Code on the command line. This could also be Claude Desktop. It could be ChatGPT, but it could also be anything that then wants to interact with a model on a programmatic basis. And so, you know, there's plenty of ways via Bedrock or Azure Foundry, whatever they call it these days, the ability for people to be able to go and run LLMs against data sources. So whilst we're interacting with it here, you could end up leveraging an LLM inside of Bedrock to be able to get information out of your model in a way that is more consistent than asking it to go and query a database. Because a database, you know, you have to be able to tee it up with all the joins. You have to assume that it's going to follow those joins properly. What you're doing with a model like Saiku, or any of the other semantic modeling tools that are out there, it really allows you to then be able to define what that model looks like so you can trust the data that's coming out of the service far more. We also put stuff like data provenance and stuff in there so that you can ask Claude where that data came from. He'll be able to like trace it back. But you know, what you've got here, obviously, just before I go on, this is the fictitious data set. There is nothing real in here. I asked Claude to create 250,000 rows of fictitious data before we started this. This is the output of it. So don't try and match this up with real life. But you know, volume is essentially uniform across all regions. Revenue spread net is 3.3% between top and bottom. Top states by net revenue are California, New Jersey, Texas, New York, Michigan. California also has the highest dollar RX in the country, suggesting the brand player mix their skews toward higher price list prescriptions. Lower RX are Midwest states. Gross to net ratio is 78.6% statewide, meaning 24.1% of gross is going to rebates, discounts in aggregate, and that's worth slicing by player next. So then he says, do you want me to follow up with a rebate percentage by region or pivot to state by therapeutic class to find where the region's revenue is concentrated? So we can say, let's do state by therapeutic class. He'll kick off. Also show me the data lineage and validity of these calculations when this is done. So we'll ask him for a bit more information, and whilst that's running, we will go back to the app that we're trying to build in real time. So, okay, both of your follow-ups are handled. The connection is farmer, and the 4 tiles stay as specified. He writes some more stuff. Once you approve, I'll invoke the writing plan skill to turn this into a step-by-step implementation. So, yes, please. Go ahead. So that's on its way. And as that's going, we will flip back here and we've got a load more stuff coming out. And so this is like obviously how you can get information out of your database in a far more managed manner that you can then rely upon to be able to then reliably add this. Because the other thing you might also do, and we've done this for a number of different customers over the years and months, is leverage an LLM, but with inside the application that we're now building out using Flutter. So on top of the stats and analysis that you get out of your final app, you might also then say, well, I would like to have an LLM that then provides some written context for the output. And this type of stuff is the thing that will be able to drive that. So you can feed a prompt into a LLM. The LLM then goes and repeatedly quizzes Saiku, the OLAP cube, and gets that information back, and then goes and displays it to a user as textual summary alongside the application, which is also just returning these same numbers. But that allows you to show both summary context and also application level data, like I said, still adhering to that security boundary. And so if I had logged in to Saiku and I was only allowed to see the Michigan stuff, in this table, you would only see, well, there's New York's on the screen. If I had logged in as a New York user, I'd only get one row of output in this, but that row would then be of use for me. If I logged in as a Texas user, I could potentially only see the Texas information. But at the same time, I'm just serving the same model to the same people, and you don't have to deal with that at database level. This is very much done in the model. And the summary for national and all that type of stuff would change depending on how you want to be able to display that information to secure users. So here we got state value therapeutic class, where you can see, not much spend on gastro stuff. Immuno, though, is much higher. And a total spend across the different states at the far end. And obviously I've not asked Claude to define, what I want to see as an output. He's just gone and figured this stuff out by using the MCP server to then go and connect and analyzing the data. So again, once we've got story that's coming out the bottom, we've got information that's coming through. We've then got, I asked him how this was generated. So he's got some context that a normal LLM would not have, because obviously we created the Pharma demo inside of this Claude. So he's got some context that's not standard. But the Mondrian schema itself, net revenue, how that's been generated, this is all available to the LLMs, and so they can see how that is built out. And then how he's then going and using that stuff against the MCP server to then output that information. So validity checks I can vouch for. He gives a bunch of stuff and caveats about what he cannot vouch for from the OLAP layer. Obviously, it's synthetic data. He is aware of that. RX count, semantics, net revenue definition. There's some stuff in here, but at least that way you can figure your way out through, through the layer you're trying to do. Over here, he's still building this stuff with Flutter. Now, this will take a little bit of time because he's going to bring some things down. He's working through creating the MDX queries. So for anyone who doesn't know how Mondrian works and how an OLAP cube works, you don't use SQL. Is it still open? Yeah, okay. So if I go back here whilst that's building and I just give you a bit more context, if I click the MDX button, this is the query language that these OLAP cubes work. Under the hood, it turns it into a database SQL query, but at MDX level, this is what you get out the far end. And whilst technically you can write it by hand, there's definitely nothing stopping you, I do not suggest that you try and do that, because, it's just generally a pretty lousy way of writing queries. But some people that I know are absolute masters at writing MDX queries. And it used to be a fine art, because doing stuff like date comparisons and what have you were always hard work. But yeah, so if I click on open date filter here, I don't have up-to-date data, but you could say I want to see the last n days, I want to see month to date, I want to see year to date. All those queries really then get written into MDX. And so as you go and see it, this is the type of thing that you would then get access to. If I go back, still going. I will leave them to it. The other stuff that we didn't sort of touch upon inside of Saiku earlier is things like drill through. So if I want to understand how some of this data is made up of, I could say, well, I want to drill through this existing query and see some more stuff. And this will then obviously pop out, some of the stuff you're looking at with drill through and the various fields that you selected. Along with drill through, you've also got drill across, which is then technically, if they were connected, how you get from one cube to another, and also be able to see various connected elements. Something beeped to me. Here we go. So the plan is complete. I will tell it to do sub-agent driven, and we are off and ready.